Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our Family and Friends edition. I'm Jill Catherine, the host of our chat, and happy to be here today. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, every month we release one of these videos that we take a few moments just to share some insights, some information about eating, about how you may be able to support your loved one who could be struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating or body image. So what we aim to do in this conversation is to speak in broad terms because the situation in your loved one is completely unique to you and them, but there are a number of approaches and support systems that broadly are helpful for anyone in these areas in some capacity. So I encourage you on this chat to take what resonates with you, leave the rest, and try to take what resonates or even what is being shared today and see if you can hear it from the lens in which you're facing this challenge. So how it makes sense to you. So that's the point of communicating in this nature, is to speak in these broader buckets so you can then find how it sticks for you and how it's going to make sense. So what I like to do is give you some insights into, every week we have a chat for those who are in recovery. And we do a lot of life skill talk, and that connects back to the particular challenges we might have in this area of eating disorder, disordered eating, and body image. But it really comes back to a lot of life skill we talk about, emotional skill we talk about, negotiating the insides and the outsides, the pressures, the expectations of the world, and what is then how that intersects with whatever is happening inside of us, our own pressures, our own inner expectations. Where did they come from? What do we really want? Who are we? What do we care about? It's asking these bigger and deeper questions. So I wanted to give you insights into two of the chats we've had in the past month as a way to see how it can then spark you to think about what you can do for your loved one. So one of the things we've been talking about in our weekly chat for those in recovery is about how important it is to forge your own path in recovery, to really blaze your own trail. For each and every one of us who have gone through it or are going through it, it's really about blazing your own trail. And in that chat where we talked about this, we had people shared a few of the different things, ways that they forged their own path. And we call that a signpost. Like, that was unique to them. That was a signpost that helped them on their path. And we talked about how those signposts, wherever they are on their path, maybe they're 20 miles down the road or 20 years down the road or 2 years or 2 months down the road from that particular signpost, the thing that they did, that signpost is a thing that they did that they became aware of, that moved them forward in their recovery. Maybe it was an insight, maybe it was a new belief, something they really learned about themselves, maybe it was a new passion, maybe it was a direction they took, but it became like an anchor part of their path, something that they learned about themselves along the way, and how that can continue to serve us well beyond even just thinking about recovery. It can serve us well in our future about keeping us in a path that feels like who we are and from a place of where we want to keep growing from. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention and thinking about the ways that you can understand and support your loved one. So from a place of understanding your loved one, because this comes up often. I actually just had a chat with a young high school student who is an athlete and is in the early stages of working with her treatment team. And her parents really care and they really want her to feel better, and they're helping her to get treatment, but they don't really get it, and particularly one of her parents they just don't really get it. They don't understand. They think that they don't understand why it's so hard for her to eat and why it's so hard to follow a meal plan and why she's even having the thoughts she's having. None of it makes sense to them. And I want to say to you that if you are one of those parents or one of those people who has a loved one in your life, that none of this makes sense to you, that's normal. It can't make sense to you. It's actually, you actually have to know so much more about this for it to make sense to you that it's almost impossible for it to make sense to you unless you've been through it or you've just been in it a really long time or you've been overwhelming yourself with education. It's irrational, right? So her parent, it's so irrational to them to think why that the belief is that she's still consciously choosing not to eat and to have all these behaviors, that they still think that she's consciously choosing that, and they can't figure it. It doesn't make any sense because it doesn't, because it makes no sense. And this is why it makes no sense to you, because when the body is underfed, the brain is affected. So your loved one's brain is affected. So what seems rational that's not happening anymore. So for you, if you haven't had the effects of the eating disorder brain chemistry change, you're going to say what? You're not going to understand. And guess what? They're not even understanding. Because they might have the desire to not have this, but it is such a neurological issue at times, depending on where they're at. They almost feel like they can't do what they want to do because of the eating disorder brain. So my point is, it's not going to make sense to you because the brain isn't making sense. And what's happening, the voices and the thoughts inside of them they're not sensible. That's why it's such a deadly disease and a scary disease, because you can't understand it. And to think that someone's brain would be having these obsessive thoughts and in a way that is preventing them from doing the most natural thing to do, which is if you're hungry, eat, and just and then stop them from doing it, or then engage in maybe all these unhealthy behaviors, it's not going to make sense. And that's why we call it a brain disease, how the underfeeding affects your brain that way. So your brain isn't going to understand that at all. And as someone, myself, struggled with this when I was 18 years old, I can tell you, and when talking to this young woman, same for her, but different, where she and I remember when our brain wasn't like that, when our brain didn't obsess like that. And then things happened, and then we underfed. And then all of a sudden our brain changes. And that's where this young woman is at. And this was many years ago for me, and my brain's not there today. I've healed and recovered, and I can't even remember the years that I was sick. I don't even remember. My state was so different. So you really gotta understand that on some level. And if you can understand that in a way that you can't understand, that is huge. And to stop, then to pause right then and there from projecting onto your loved one this need for them to stop shaming them for not being better, right? Start trying to understand the nuances around what it is that they need. Right. And a way to do that is by connecting with their treatment team, reaching out to them, asking them specific questions of what can I do in these certain situations. You're not going to know, right? So, and I can't tell you specifically, but your loved one's treatment team, if they're a minor, hope you could be able to reach out to them and ask for support. And if not, right, and say they're older, or just in general what you can do, when I talk about the need for them to forge their own path in recovery. Why I shared that is because they're going to start to have these signposts, these aha moments for themselves that are these turning points for them. And you want to encourage that. You want to encourage them to explore what is at the root of this. What is really at the root? It's not the food, even though that's a very necessary piece and an important one. The root isn't that. So accepting that you can't understand it, stepping back from telling them just to be better and that they're screwing up and that they're ruining their lives and that they should be doing it different doesn't help. But what does help is encouraging them to keep exploring and finding what's at the root. To keep wanting, keeping them hungry for that. So that they can find and start forging their own path. Right? To start forging their own path. And I've said this a lot on our chats for family and friends, is that a lot of the times when they start finding their own path, it could be in conflict with your path. And I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but that can happen often. And what's important for their health is to live in alignment with their path. So that can be a lot of challenges for families, and understandably so. So part of this chat is for you to get it's education, get some more information so you can start to find your truth to these things and how then you can approach it. So encouraging your loved one to explore and really dive into what's at the root of this, and that what you can do to support them is really encouraging them in that process, being patient with them when they want to give up. Get that, but still be a strong, steady, your own signpost that's going to still keep them moving forward. Even when they want to give up, you're going to help them understand that you get that, because they're doing really hard work. Like, that's the thing, is that your loved one, for them to recover for this, they really have to take time to feel the most uncomfortable feelings that maybe you don't want to even feel for yourself. How many of us want to sit with the places that we feel shame, the ways that we're embarrassed, the ways that we're scared, the ways that we're insecure? I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to sit with those really uncomfortable spaces inside yourself and explore them and start to have a relationship with them in order to recover. And that is something I think all of us can understand, whether you have that brain or not, is you can understand how difficult that is and the strength that it takes. So, and why it can be like something you want to give up on, because it can be draining and it takes a lot of work. So encourage your loved one through that process. Recognize, if you could recognize for them that you understand how much how hard the emotional stuff is that they're doing, and be proud of them. Be proud that they're exploring these parts of themselves. Be proud of them. Tell your loved one that you're proud that they're going to those places. and that they're learning about themselves in these ways, because what they're doing is healing themselves, or healing these parts of themselves that, so hopefully later down the road, these skills are going to stay with them forever. These signposts stay with them forever. They learn how to be in these uncomfortable places. So then when more difficulty happens in life, as you and I know it will, continues to have challenges, that they're going to be able to navigate them in ways that a lot of people don't have the skills to do without turning to self-destructive behaviors. Maybe more socially acceptable, or maybe more normalized, or maybe more you don't even under the radar destructive behaviors. But so they're really going to be learning really powerful things about themselves that can help them down the road. So encourage them to explore the root of this so that they can start to forge their own path. The other thing is something that we're talking about in our recovery group as well, is the practice for us to be honest with ourselves, the practice of being honest with ourselves. And what we talked about was how to practicing that on a regular basis, right? So so not just putting on a smiling face when we're really struggling, not just pleasing people and just trying to act like everything's okay, just trying to be honest with ourselves as much as we can. And how that's a practice. How much that is just a day-to-day, a moment-to-moment practice. And the reason why it's so important for us to practice being honest with ourselves, because we can't begin to get the solutions we need in our life, to get the support we need, if we're not being honest. If we're not being honest with ourselves, we can't even deal with the problem at hand because we're not being honest, right? So we talked about why it's so important to be honest, because that's where the solution lies. That's where the answers live. So we had to talk about, how to work through some of the fears and the judgment that happens when we're honest with ourselves. So I share that with you because the more that you can practice being honest with your loved one is going to help that communication level and breaking down those barriers where, like I said, that you might not be able to get it. And so instead of saying certain things that aren't helpful, because when you try to say things to your loved one from a place of you not getting it, it really doesn't help them. Like things like, oh, why can't you just do this? Or you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or can't you just follow your plan, or what's wrong with you? Or, when you're just trying to think they're doing it on purpose type of thing. So as I said, if you can just pause from that, accept that that's not helpful and that you can't get it because it's not the brain, it's not something that makes any sense, because it's not. And then instead, being willing to just practice being honest with your loved one, which could look like, I'm scared. Telling your loved one, you're scared, you're concerned, you're worried, you don't get it. It makes no sense to you. I can't tell you how much more powerful it is for you to say to your loved one, if you have a term of endearment, honey, I really just don't get this. But then you say, but I get that it is not easy and that I don't have to get it, and it makes me scared and I feel powerless. Being honest, instead of allowing your fear and your fear to direct all this other stuff that you're going to say to them, which won't be helpful, just telling them that you're scared, that you don't get it. but that you want to support them, that you want to do what you can to help them. Ask them to help you, ask them to share with you what you can do. Because they're going to they personally are going to say, what would be helpful would be this. Or they're going to say, what's not helpful is this. So practicing honesty with your loved one is going to break down some communication barriers that I can't say that I promise it's going to be better in the end, because I can't promise anything, but usually when communication barriers can be broken down and we can just be honest with how we're feeling as opposed to speaking from fear and then blaming people, most of the time it makes you closer. You feel more connected. You feel more supported. Your loved one will feel more supported by you the more honest you are with them. And it's going to help them to be honest with themselves, and for you to encourage them to keep being honest with themselves, that you're because their fear so much of the time is say they're really struggling, and say they really want to get better, but they're still really struggling with behaviors. They're not going to want to be honest and say, I'm really struggling. They're not going to a lot of times they're not going to want to say, well, here's what's really going on, because they don't want to disappoint. They're scared. They feel shame. So if you can start to cultivate a space within your relationship that can allow for that honesty to exist, that it's not about being perfect, that it's not about no symptoms. It's what it's always about is let's keep being as honest as we can with it so we can keep helping each other. So that honesty it's not about being perfect. It's about being honest, and that we can support each other along the way. And that's where we can help each other. So, as you move forward with your loved one, you want to just think about that practice of honesty, you being honest with them, and thinking about and giving energy to encouraging them to keep exploring what's in them that has gotten to this point. Keep exploring what is it that needs to be healed. Because as they do that, then they can forge their own path in recovery, and they'll feel supported along the way. We'll see you next month.